Hello and welcome to a live Kerfefe break on Deprogram with Keri Smith. I'm your host, Keri, and I'm here today with one of my friends who I'm so excited I just got to see this week in New York, Miss Libby Emmons. How are you, Libby?
I'm good, Keri. How are you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired in a good way from traveling all over and seeing people. It's been a very busy June. Today's the first day of July.
hmm
That's going to be great. But yeah, I'm
I thought
good.
it was great because everyone came to New York. All I had to do was get to Manhattan, which was
Yeah,
like, then I just cross the river, you know?
yeah.
Normally I have to go wherever, Texas and everywhere else.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Libby was a panelist at Minds Fest, the Festival of Ideas in New York this past week. And it was just a great lineup. It was everyone from Libby to Daryl Davis, Cornel West, what's his name? Seth Dillon from the Babylon
Seth
Bee.
Dillon from Babylon Bee,
Yeah,
Majid Nawaz was there. It was really fascinating.
yeah. I
So many
loved the
people.
lady on stage with you, Margaret. What's her last name?
Margaret Kimberly, I didn't know her before, but she's so interesting.
Yeah,
You know, I love when people, even if I disagree with them, can speak intelligently and wisely about their ideas. It's like, oh, great, we can actually have a conversation. It's
yeah.
perfect. Yeah, she was
She's
very
what I
funny and
would
interesting.
call, would you agree? She's what I would call a real progressive. Sometimes I try and explain this to people. There are some progressives who are not woke, in my opinion.
hmm
And and then I have people ask, well, what's the difference? What does that mean? And that's what I would describe her as real progressive. Anti-war, very skeptical of corporate media,
hmm
uh corporate we
Yeah,
talked about.
and I think that what really makes the difference is, and I think sort of what you mean is she has her views. She knows what they are based on. She knows why she believes what she believes, and she can express it. That
Yeah.
is just not true. That's not the woke thing, right? I mean, the woke thing is more of a, and you speak at length about this, you know, and James Lindsay
Mhm.
talks about this. It's more of a cult thing where you're repeating talking points and you're part of an echo chamber. You're not discussing why you think something. You're not explaining what your beliefs are based on, you know.
Yeah.
You're just speaking what you're told or what you're hearing. And that's sort of how I've defined that woke idea as it's come to, as it's sort of like evolved today. It's almost like uh, just the people who can't express why they believe, why they have these views. They don't even know why. They
They don't
just
know why, and they want to
hmm
censor, which she doesn't. She said on the panel
no.
with you, "Don't ban anything."
Yeah, she's a total free speech, old school. Stand up for what you believe in, know what you believe, why. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's my kind of person. And it doesn't matter if we agree or not, you know, because we agree on the real principles, the real
Yes.
thing, you know. Self-expression, free speech. I'm very anti-war myself. Um, and also the ability to express yourself in a thoughtful and clear way, uh, and to understand that intellectual conversation um, is an area where you should be exploring all the ideas. There should never be a censorship of ideas.
Yeah.
Anything is up for grabs to explore, whether it's something that you end up agreeing with or something you don't agree with. It's all on the table to play with. You know,
Yeah.
that's what we're there to do. So I liked her quite a bit too.
I did too. I see
I'm an instant
Laura.
fan.
Me too. I was talking with her before you guys went on, and I didn't know who she was at the time. We were just having an interesting conversation about changing neighborhoods in Harlem and Austin and other,
hmm
gentrification. And anyway, she was very interesting. And like Laura says in the chat, it's refreshing. It is refreshing. I think that because woke has become so dominant now, a lot of people, especially if they're on the right, maybe they will say things like they think it's all the same. It's not. There are real progressives who are not woke, and you may disagree with them on economic policy or other things, but they're not against free speech. So that was awesome. But
hmm Yeah, I like that too.
so
Plus, it
I
was
wanted
fun to perform live on stage in my hometown. That
yeah,
was
at the
cool.
Beacon Theater, no
At
less.
the
What a
Beacon
great
Theater.
theater.
Yeah, it was really fun.
Yeah, it was good.
It was
And then
cool.
all these other people came, like Alex Stein was there, the comedian who goes to city councils, Billboard Chris. I
Hmm.
saw Seamus from Freedom Tunes. Like, it was just a
Hmm.
good, people came together. It was awesome.
Yeah,
So I wanted to ask you about, since it's still in the news, it's going to be in the news for a while, I think, 'cause this is the thing people are talking about. Can you give an overview, if you wouldn't mind, of what the Roe v. Wade decision means? Because I see so many people online, well, admittedly, maybe a lot of leftists, but saying things about abortion being illegal now and women's rights are being taken away. Can you explain a little bit about what the ruling was?
sure. It's no secret that we have some newly conservative or new justices on the court who are conservative and who probably disagree with the concept of abortion entirely. However, their argument in overturning the ruling, the 1973 Roe v. Wade ruling, the logic behind overturning it was that there is no right to abortion, as the Democrats would say, enshrined in the Constitution. The Roe decision actually cobbled together and inferred from several different amendments and principles in the Constitution that abortion is legal and a right, therefore, or not legal and a right, therefore, is a right and therefore is legal.
Mhm.
This court, looked at it and said the previous ruling that cobbled together this right out of a bunch of other amendments and ideas is actually incorrect. And anything that is not directly elucidated in the Constitution is meant to revert to decisions by state legislatures. That is what the Constitution says. If something is not enumerated herein, basically the states get to decide. So, what the Supreme Court did was they said the Roe ruling is overturned on the basis that this is not elucidated in the Constitution and should never have been said that it was, and now the states get to decide for themselves. So
Mhm.
it's a states' rights thing, and
Mhm.
I find it fascinating. Whether or not you agree with abortion, uh, for a long time I have often thought, the the Roe decision was incorrect because it's clearly not in the Constitution. I mean, could you see Thomas Jefferson, Madison, Hamilton being like, what we really need to do? We really need to make sure that women have the codified right to terminate their pregnancies
In
prior
the
to birth.
federal, yeah, that the federal
In the
government
federal,
needs to be involved.
you couldn't see that at all. First of all, it was hard to have babies. Like, you'd die having babies. It was a different time. There was much higher maternal mortality. But I don't think this was, I don't know a lot about the history of abortion going back to the colonial times. I know a little bit more about it in terms of like Norwegian law, oddly, just
Mhm.
because I did a whole deep dive into Knut Hampson one time and I read like all of his books at once. Um, but yeah, so I think, yeah, so that's it. It's a states' rights
Well,
issue, is what the court said. Yeah.
so you know who would agree with you about the Roe v. Wade ruling is Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Hmm.
And I don't know if people are aware of that on the left, but she's on the record talking, I think it was at a law school, about how she thought the ruling was flawed. Now, and she's pro-choice, but she thought the ruling was flawed. And I think do you think if she had been on this court, she would have gone with the majority?
I'm not sure. That's an
Mm.
interesting question. It's a question where the question is, would RBG have gone in favor of the ruling that she knew was constitutionally correct? Or would she have been too overwhelmingly concerned about losing abortion access to do so? When I talk to women who are on the left, um, that is their conundrum, right? They look at it and it's like, yeah, kind of
Yeah.
really is a states' rights issue, but it's too important. What I hear from people over and over is like, it's too important to let it just be left willy nilly up to the states. But what's interesting is the Congress had 50 years. It's 50 years in 2023 that this ruling has been on the books. They had 50 years to create a law protecting abortion, allowing abortion to be legal federally, and they did not do it. In fact, after the draft ruling was leaked, that unprecedented leak from the Supreme Court in May, you had Chuck Schumer from New York, who I keep not voting for, and he keeps getting reelected, and you had Nancy Pelosi from California putting up the bill, the Women's Health, like Women's Health Act or something like that. And this bill would have codified Roe into law, but it also went substantially further than most Americans would be comfortable in abortion, because given various circumstances, including a mother's mental health, abortion would be legal under that bill up to the full 9 months of pregnancy. There are very few people in the United States who are comfortable terminating a child up to 9 months.
Yeah.
It
And
seems really evil, especially since a child, as we know, infants who are born at 21 weeks even can survive with medical assistance. And those numbers keep going, that age keeps getting lower and lower.
Yes.
9 months is a baby.
Yeah.
It's 7 months is a baby. You can terminate a pregnancy at 7 months in Oregon. It's clearly a baby. 6 months
Why
is
do
a
you
baby.
think, well, first of all, someone in the chat asked about feedback. It's not feedback. It's Libby's son is talking with his friends.
Oh,
So
I will tell him to be a little quiet. Hey, Charlie. Everybody can hear you on the live stream.
Hello, Charlie.
Can you take your voice down? My son's best friend is overseas for the entire summer with his family,
That's
to
amazing.
see family, in North Africa. So there's like very limited time when they get to talk, and so whenever it's a convenient time, because he's with cousins and whatever else, so whenever it's a convenient time for his friend and their family, I let them talk, and they are playing Xbox remotely together.
That's amazing.
I mean, it's his very best friend.
Yeah,
He's
of
just
course.
like, oh,
of course. It doesn't bother me. Don't worry. I'm telling people what it is. Do not worry about it. Yeah, Leon says, I don't mind the noises. It isn't too distracting. No, it's like talking to a friend and there are kids in the background. It doesn't matter. So I have a question for you about this. You're talking about in Oregon, I think you said that people can abort up like at 7 months, which is, it's a baby. I saw Mike Cernovich say something on Twitter. I think it was Cernovich the other day that I agreed with. And he said, for me, it wasn't religion that changed my mind about abortion. It was actually seeing the ultrasounds of my baby. And he said, if why can't Democrats, and why can't people who are pro-abortion come to some compromise on, after the first trimester, no, but before that, okay. Like, why is there no compromise? Why are they trying to push bills that allows for abortion for the full 9 months?
This is my exact same question. Why do that? Why conceivably do that? There have been a number of bans that have gone into place. There have been, across the US, some that went into place prior to the ruling in anticipation of it, and some that have been enacted afterwards. There are others that went into effect in the event that Roe was overturned. They were already on the books. So this has happened across the country. And now we do have sort of this weird hodgepodge, right? There are some states that say abortion is illegal after the first 15 weeks. I'm pretty sure this is very similar to lots and lots of places in Europe. And of course, they're like, oh, women don't get any more rights to abortion in the US, or however you talk in Europe. And they,
but they have their own.
But they have the exact same rules, very similar rules.
Yeah, I think it's 13 weeks.
Yeah, Florida, 12, 13, 15. In Florida, DeSantis signed a bill that was supposed to go into effect, I think, today. That was a 15-week abortion ban, and a judge put a hold on that Now in Florida in 2021, there were almost 80,000 abortions, and that was up some 5,000 abortions from the previous year. And it was up again, like some 6,000 abortions from the previous year. Florida is like number 3 in the country in abortions. California doesn't even keep track. There's almost 1 million abortions in the US per year. I think 2021, forgive me if my numbers are a little off, I think it was something like 893,000 abortions in the US. That's a lot of abortions. And California, as I said, doesn't keep track. They don't have any data on how many abortions they do. So the CDC keeps records on abortion by collecting voluntary information. Like if you send your abortion stats to the CDC, they will record it.
Why would
but
you
they
do
don't
that?
reach out.
Yeah.
Yeah, why would you do that? California doesn't. New York does. Florida does. Lots of states do. The Guttmacher Institute, they actually reach out to every abortion provider in the country and say, how many abortions did you do? How many abortions did you do? So if you don't report it, if you're a clinic and you say, I don't want to report it, your numbers don't get included. But these are basically the two sets of statistics that we have: the CDC taking information that's given to them, and Guttmacher going after the information. So that's sort of what we know. Now, my perspective is that Congress should do something reasonable if this is what the people want. The reason I think that they haven't done anything in 50 years is because they do not believe that their constituents primarily want it. The states that have secured abortion access and made abortion legal,
like California,
New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, they're not going to change anything. Their constituents have made this clear. It's in the state constitution. It's in the state constitution in New York for sure. Our fool governor keeps pointing that out. And she can do that if she wants. I hope she doesn't get elected again. But anyway, she didn't get elected the first time. So so those states are not going to change their minds. I was actually talking to friends yesterday who were remarkably concerned. These are all leftist, smart people. I can talk to them. There's not any of this like, I can't talk to you because we disagree. No, we've been disagreeing for 20 years. We're going to keep disagreeing. It's no big deal. These are like my oldest friends. So we were talking, and they are all very concerned that contraception is going to be illegal next. And they can't move out of the state or any of the states that have abortion as legal. All of these crazy concerns. And I was just like, it's not really like that. New York has this, you're fine. Connecticut, New Jersey, all of these places that these northeastern liberal elites want to live, they're going to have it. Like, they don't want to move to Alabama. They never will. Never going to move to Mississippi or even Oklahoma, never going to happen. So I think it's pretty interesting. But I think the reason there's no compromise is because the constituents who are pro-abortion do not want to compromise, and the constituents who are completely opposed to abortion cannot compromise on moral grounds. It's sort of interesting. Yeah.
Is it wrong of me that I sort of hope that this causes some people who might happen to be more woke to leave Texas? Like, that's an unintended consequence, maybe, that I'm like, I would be okay with it if you just, because Austin, as I mentioned at the beginning, I was talking with Margaret about it, Austin is changing a lot. And so when I first heard about this ruling, I was thinking, okay, good. They're going to start making these Handmaid's Tale posters and stuff about states like Texas. I'm like, great, put those out there. Don't tell people not to come. It's just an awful dystopian handmade nightmare here.
Meanwhile, like the biggest Handmaid's Tale similarity that I can see is surrogacy, where you pay a woman to rent her body and her biological material in order to take the baby and manufacture motherless children. Why are we doing this? What? I hate surrogacy so much. I think it's just so, I think it's wrong, not just to the women, but I mostly think it's really wrong. Commercial surrogacy. I'm not talking about you know, your best friend, your sister, you want to help them out, create a family. I'm talking about paid surrogacy, pregnancy as an industry, buying and selling women and babies as an industry. This is what I'm opposed to. That I think is really, I think it's bad for the kids too, on top of everything else.
Can you no? I'm actually looking up an image that I think illustrates this very well. I saw Local Distance put this out. And you know what? Surrogacy is not something I really thought about until the past year. And I've heard the libertarian argument that, as long as people are consenting adults, what does it matter to you if they're being paid? Why is it that it bothers you that it's a business of renting, I guess, the woman's womb?
I'm also not in favor of legalized prostitution, and I think that surrogacy is essentially prostitution, except you're getting screwed for 9 months.
Okay. Yeah, I can see
Also,
that.
I think, yeah, there's also, when we talk about commercial surrogacy, we're talking about hiring a woman to undergo fertility treatments that have a huge impact on her body. Fertility treatments, IVF, that is not easy on a woman to undergo. I can see if I was a mother and this was the way that I had to conceive in order to have a child, I don't know that I would have gone through with that, but I certainly understand as a mother why somebody would want to do that and risk everything to do it. But it's not easy. It's not even always safe. It's not even foolproof. So what happens is with IVF, you undergo like all of these hormone treatments for months. You have your eggs extracted, which is also, which, that's a whole procedure. And then you have the embryos implanted, and they implant multiple at the same time in order to, hope that one works out. Then you're carrying a child for this whole period of time. Pregnancy is not easy. It's really, really not easy. And to get paid to do that is tough. Also, you are required as a surrogate, this can't be your first pregnancy. So you have to have been pregnant before, which means that the people who are undergoing and becoming surrogates are already mothers. So now they are carrying children. They already have children at home. In a lot of cases, they have husbands and families. I feel like that would be divisive for a family. I feel like that undermines a family structure. My wife is carrying some other man's baby. That seems remarkably emasculating to me. I can see that breeding an awful lot of resentment. And then the idea too is that the surrogate mother, is not meant to be bonding with the child who's in her womb. I don't know how you separate your emotions from what's going on in your body, which creates emotions. I mean, everything goes crazy. You feel all these wild things all of the time. I think it would be horrifyingly depressing to feel like you cannot connect to the baby in your womb just in order to save yourself the excruciating pain of having to give the child away. Women talk about this. Women talk about how difficult it is. Also, the people who, I know that there are plenty of surrogate families who hire surrogates who are good and solid families and what have you. But there's also plenty of cases that we see where that's not the case. There was a surrogate mom carrying triplets. All 3 embryos took. Then she got word from the buyer that he only wanted 2, and she had to abort one. And he wanted her to abort one. She said no, that she would not do it. It turned out this was a single man living in his parents' basement who had hired a surrogate to deliver children to him. Now he has 3 children. Single man living in his parents' basement. She wants custody of them because, she connected to these. I don't know how you don't connect. I don't know how you don't connect. I mean, I guess it's part of, we see in like hookup culture, this whole idea where you're supposed to be able to have casual sex without any emotions at all.
Yes, that's what it's making me think of. That idea that I think it's a false idea that you can separate emotions from physical intimacy. And
It's
you're making
almost
me think of it.
masochistic. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I was talking with friends about that this past week, actually. I don't know if that's more of a female thing than it is a male thing, but personally, I know myself and other friends of mine that I've talked to, women who sort of, I just think based on our conversations, their experiences, my experiences, it's sort of impossible to do that because your body's releasing bonding chemicals, oxytocin.
Right.
You release oxytocin when you're pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, so then you give the child away. I don't know how the so these are concerns I have. Also, if you have a situation where, like this single guy living in his parents' basement, there's no mother on the other side, you are intentionally creating children with no mothers. I think we would all agree that when a baby loses a mother, whether in childbirth, um, which essentially surrogacy is losing your mother in childbirth, or whether you are there was a young mother shot in the head just yesterday, I believe, in New York City, crossing the street with her 3-month-old child in a stroller. Someone came up and shot her in the head. I think we can all agree that it is a tragedy for a child to lose their mother at any age and to grow up without that mother. And here we are advocating for motherless children to be
Yeah.
born, and we're saying that this is some sort of great step forward. It's just not. I grew up substantially without my mom around. I saw her like on school breaks and stuff. I had a stepmom at home, who worked very hard and did a lot of good in raising me, with values that I still hold up. But I missed my mom, and she
Mm.
was alive and she was there and I could access her on school breaks. So there's a lot there, and
Yeah.
as a mom now, um, going through that and then not having a child at the end. I mean, the only reason to go through pregnancy is because you get this prize at the end, and then you get to hope that you can get to know that person their whole life and watch them grow up, and ideally end up surrounded by grandbabies, right? Like that's the point. That's like the whole point of reproduction, as far as I can tell, is uh, creating and furthering love through the ages. Ideally, maybe
Yeah.
I'm an idealist in that sense, but
Well, so
how
here's
sad
the
to not do that.
image on the screen. Local Distance tweeted this out, and it's a picture of two men. It says our maternity shoot, and they're in the foreground and they're looking in each other's eyes lovingly. And in the background, there's a woman dressed in red. I saw someone else Photoshop this. They put her in a handmaid's outfit, but she's a pregnant woman in red who's in the background holding her pregnant belly. And he said kind of what you said, treating women as nothing but baby incubators doesn't look like The
Mm-hmm.
Handmaid's Tale. It looks like a maternity shoot with two men in the foreground and a nameless pregnant woman in the background, face covered, displayed as a decorative object.
And blurred
And
out. She's
and
blurred out. Is she
yeah,
blurred out? No, not really.
well,
That's fine.
not really, but she's back there, kind of
She's
lurking. There's
Yeah.
our baby. It's in the back. It's coming.
And the way that she's looking down is so sad. Like, this isn't even mine. I get to touch you for this period of time and no more. It's
Yeah,
just really so sad and depressing to me.
it's an
I
odd
do
choice
think,
for a photo shoot, I
yeah,
think.
I do think there's a difference if it's like I said, my sister can't have children. I'm going to carry a child for her
No money
altruistically.
exchanged.
No money exchanged. I think that's a little different. Um, and I think also that is up to grown adults to decide what they want to do with their bodies. The issue with surrogacy, commercial surrogacy, is that we are creating an industry of buying women and harvesting children from their wombs. And it doesn't
Yeah.
just happen in the US, it happens all over the world. There was a story that I heard on Radiolab years and years ago. And the story was about an Israeli gay couple that decided they wanted to have a natural child.
Hmm.
So they bought eggs from an Estonian woman. They mixed those eggs with their own sperm to create embryos. they implanted those embryos. Those embryos were then implanted in the body of an Indian woman who was in Nepal, where she was going to birth the babies. And the episode of Radiolab was called Cheap White Eggs. And that was the story. They wanted a white baby, so they bought cheap white eggs from Eastern Europe. Then they implanted them in an Indian woman who was in Nepal, because in India, it is illegal to be a surrogate. And in Nepal, surrogacy is legal, but Nepalese women can't do it. So it was a very bizarre situation. And then there was a massive earthquake. I'm pretty sure this happened. And there was a massive earthquake in Nepal. The Israeli couple went to get their babies, but the babies had no nationality. They weren't Israeli, they weren't Estonian, they weren't Indian, and they weren't Nepalese. Who are these children? Where are they from? What is their lineage? What is their culture? What are they coming from? We are divorcing these children from any stability of past. You know, they are just these free-floating whatevers created for the whims and hedonistic desires of
people with money.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat, I just wanted to highlight a couple of these comments. Well, first here, let me do, thank you guys for the super chats. Inside of the Ages says, we can't talk about this topic without mentioning the financial incentive of cost per pound. Fetal matter is big business. He's talking about abortion.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tara, thanks Tara. Tara says abortion, birth control, and the fertility industry. I can never say this word. Can you say it?
Bifurcate.
Okay.
That's it.
I want to say bifurcate. No. Bifurcate sex from reproduction, which is a denial of biological reality.
Yeah, I totally agree. With that.
And there was another one. I don't know if I can find it now, but there was someone just talking about the money involved. It might have been Dangerous Rhett if they were here, and just saying that, you know, in California, for example, I think they said it's $150,000 for a surrogate. I mean, it's a money-making industry. Someone else asked, how does a guy living in the basement afford it? Well, he's saving on rent. So he's in his parents' basement.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a coder. I don't know. I hear that's lucrative. I have no idea.
You know, who you should talk to sometime, probably. I think you guys would have an interesting conversation. Do you know Mary Lou Singleton?
I don't think so, but I've heard that name before for sure.
So I interviewed her recently. She did an event with me and Megan Murphy called Women Leaving the Left. Now,
that's why I heard of it. I was like, oh, damn, I wish I was going to this thing.
Oh, it was great. Oh, we had crazy, awesome protesters. But Mary Lou's, so she's so interesting. She's someone I would put in that same group as being an actual progressive. And she's been a midwife for decades. She talked to me all about the history of midwifery, which I didn't know was pronounced that way, midwifery. And she talked about what you're talking about. When did birth become like an industry that was regulated by the government and by the medical establishment instead of just by midwives? When did abortion become under the domain of government and the medical establishment and that kind of stuff? But she also had she has so much knowledge on IVF, on surrogacy, on all the things you're talking about. And anyway, I think you guys would have a good conversation. But she told me about, I didn't know about IVF, about, again, money's always involved, right? Like what a big money-making industry that is, and the effects that it has on a woman's body, how they stimulate you so you produce a lot of eggs at once, which isn't natural. And
it's gotta feel weird.
Yeah, just a lot of things about it that I just wasn't aware of. So, well, thank you for talking about the abortion, like the legality, like what happened with the ruling. I have a question for you about culture, because I keep wanting to have the conversation about abortion, not in this legal realm anyway. I want to talk about it culturally, what's happened. And when I try to do that online, it always devolves into people wanting to talk about the legality again. And I just am not as interested in that. I'm more interested in, from my perspective, it seems that when I was younger, and I was always, I was at the pro-choice marches and I was solidly pro-choice, and I would argue with people online forever about it, defending choice. And um, I believed that the goal was to make it safe, legal, and rare.
Mm-hmm.
And
I thought so too.
right. And I saw, you did an excellent tweet thread about this. It doesn't seem that that's really the goal. And I think culturally we've reached a place where we're celebrating it as some achievement or some
Mm-hmm.
evidence of empowerment. And can you talk a little bit about where are we at culturally on abortion?
Yeah, I am with you. Safe, legal, and rare was something that I, if not could get behind, could accept as a reasonable standard. I saw a video of an abortion when I was in 8th grade at my church when they wanted us to not get abortions ever. And it was remarkably effective. I went to Catholic school for a good while. And I was never pro-abortion. But when I moved in with my mom when I was about 16, she was horrified that I was not pro-choice, right? And so she talked to me at length about it, and I was like, I just think it's really bad. I think it's a really bad thing to do, like no one should do this. And she said, okay, well, no one should do it, but safe, legal, and rare. And I gave that some substantial thought over the years. And I thought, okay, safe, nobody gets hurt other than obviously, the subject of the abortion. Legal, that way there's not a crazy black market in something that's dangerous. Rare, nobody should do it. If you do it, you should have a really good reason. You should figure that out. Probably you shouldn't do it. Let's make it rare. Okay. Okay. It's not gonna be my voting issue. I'm not in favor of it, but okay. Fine. That's where I was. And then several years ago, we had Lindy West, I think, wrote a book called Pro.
Yes.
Is this right? And it was like, it was not pro-choice. It was literally pro-abortion. If you look back at the founder of Planned Parenthood, she was a eugenicist who hated black people and thought there should be less poor people and black people in the US. Totally like terrible views, really terrible views. Planned Parenthood in the past few years has tried to distance themselves from those views. But if you use the logic of the left, where we can't like the Constitution because Thomas Jefferson owned slaves, how are we going to back Planned Parenthood? Like, really? It's okay when it's Margaret Sanger, who's way more recent and just a racist eugenicist, than it is for our founding documents from like way longer ago. Which is it, guys? Where are you going with this?
Yes.
So that's sort of interesting as well. Side note. Lindy West wrote Pro, and I suddenly thought, now we're not talking about safe, legal, and rare. We're talking about safe, legal, and on demand.
Yes.
This is a different standard. This is an unacceptable standard. Then we started seeing that in all of the really smarty pants magazines. We started seeing it in New York Magazine and the Washington Post and all of these places that are like, oh, we're smart and elite and fascinating and intellectual, and it's reasonable to be in favor of abortion, just so that your life isn't inconvenienced and you can maintain your lifestyle. And it turned out that when they talked about abortion as saving lives, a lot of what that meant was saving lifestyles. Abortion to save the lifestyle. To save lifestyles, mind you, that are probably not worth saving. Save lifestyles.
Wow. Yes.
Right?
True.
Hookup culture, total focus on career, hedonistic depravity, all of this stuff, and we're saying, being a mother is not great. It's terrible. It's limiting. It stifles your potential. Blah blah blah. None of that is true. My son is 12. My example is not everyone's example. I'm very lucky in how it worked out. Sort of. But anyway, I wouldn't give that up for anything ever. That's not the point. Then we started seeing Oscar-winning actresses going up on stage talking about how they never could have had their stupid careers in Hollywood.
I know.
If it weren't that they had abortions. And it's like, girl, you just made the dumbest ass movie that I've ever seen. Yes. No one cares about it. it's dumb, and you sacrificed how many lives for this? I also
It's an
started learning,
absolute celebration of narcissism. It's
celebration
like,
of
I
narcissism.
couldn't have done this, gotten this award for this
No.
movie. It's such a great thing that I aborted because I got this to
Mhm.
do this. I got to pretend in a piece of entertainment.
I got to be an actor, something that lots of mothers do.
Mhm.
You can be an actor. We also heard recently from Stevie Nicks talking about how there would have been no Fleetwood Mac if she hadn't gotten an abortion because the
Oh,
lifestyle was
Stevie.
so hedonistic. I know, it was so disappointing. I love Stevie Nicks.
I love
I
Stevie
love Fleetwood
Nicks.
Mac.
No, Stevie.
No, I like to listen to Fleetwood Mac when I go on like long bike rides. I find it's good.
It's
But
my
now I
morning
can
music.
say
Yeah, that sucks.
easy listening. But but now it's like, and she talked about, she did a lot of drugs in Fleetwood Mac and how much more important it was to do drugs and fuck around. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Screw around. Anyway, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, you could have just had one of these weird kids who grows up on the road and hates you later. Lots of people do that. Mom, you were never there. You were strung out on cocaine and Quaaludes. Well, I'm sorry, kid. I'll take care of the grandbabies. Yeah, that would,
Right. Or you could have had the baby and put the baby up for adoption
like
once
Joni Mitchell did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You could have
So,
said, you know what?
yeah.
I'm not fit to be a parent. I shouldn't have gotten pregnant, but I'm going to give this baby a chance with someone else. Like I don't know.
Yeah.
That's so poo-pooed. I don't know why adoption has become such a thing now where it's like that. I don't even hear people talking about it very much anymore.
Well,
But
remember they came after Amy Coney Barrett for having adopted children from Haiti?
oh
And they
yeah,
were like, "You're racist because you adopted black children." It's like, what? I
doesn't make any
adopted children
sense.
that I loved.
Yeah.
They are my children now.
Yeah, you can't win with social justice people.
With
Yeah.
social justice. But yeah,
So
so that I think was a big deal. The switch from safe, legal, and rare to shout your abortion was quite the cultural leap. And I also, in the past few years, have heard from a lot more women who were coerced into their abortions by their romantic partners and didn't want to give up their children, but did.
Mhm. I've
Because
certainly
they
noticed
wanted to keep the man,
they
and then
wanted to
of
keep
course
the
they
man.
didn't. I mean, they didn't keep it. In all of the cases I'm thinking of, that man is gone and good. Like, don't keep
Yeah.
that man. But yeah,
Yeah, as you said, a lifestyle not worth preserving anyway.
that's right. Yeah.
I've certainly noticed, I've talked about this before, but I have similar observations is that we've reached a place culturally where that's what I'm more interested in. What are we teaching kids? That it's no, I mean, at the very least, it's treated as something no different than having your tonsils removed. Like there's no weighty choice. Oh, you're just going in for this procedure. It's like, no big deal. You're ending a life. Like it's a weighty decision. It is. And it's different than having your tonsils removed. That's at the very
Right.
least. At worst, I've seen on TikTok and other places, I'm sure you've seen it. I've seen these young women just making a total mockery of it and doing videos. There was the one video with the girls pretending. She's like, "Oh, guys, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm pregnant." She's
Right.
pretending. And then she has this demonic look come over her face. She's like, "Just kidding. I'm aborting that." She starts pouring a glass of champagne and drinking it. And just really sort of, I don't know what, ghoulish displays of irreverence, maybe is the right word, towards the act of abortion. And so I don't like where we're at culturally at all. And now I'm at the place also, Libby, where I don't even, the past 2 years I found out, I was naive. I found out that a lot of the so-called pro-choice people, they're not pro-choice at all. They hide behind that argument. They're not pro-choice. They don't care about the autonomy of a body and being able to make your own medical decisions because they said nothing, or they supported vaccine mandates and mask
Yes.
mandates. Yes. So a big majority of the so-called pro-choice movement, they're not even pro-choice. They're liars. They're pro-abortion. So I don't want to be associated with them anymore. I
Yeah,
don't know
they
what to call
want to
myself.
tell you what to do with your body when it's convenient for them, and they want you to not tell them what they need to do with their bodies. It
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense. if it's my body, my choice, then why do I have to do what you say with my body? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
But I mean, that brings up also the logical fallacy of so many of these woke arguments, and what we were talking about with real progressives who actually have a foundation for what they believe in and why. Um, I think that I think that there are pro-choice people who are also opposed to vaccine mandates and would say get a vaccine if you choose to.
Yes, there are some principled people on the left.
Yeah, and
And
that's a much more different argument.
yes, and I respect that because they're consistent, because they actually mean what they say and they've thought it through, and they're not just spouting pro-choice when it suits me, but public health, I must force this other thing on you when it suits them. Like, I'm so done with it.
I am
So
also done with it. Yeah.
I know that you have to go soon. Kamran Pasha is going to be joining in a few minutes. I don't know if you've met him. Can I ask you your opinion on one last thing before you go?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me put this on the screen. Now, this might get me in trouble because I'm going to make a moral judgment, another moral judgment. I've
Well, so
learned we're
long as
not.
you know what your morality is, you can
Yeah.
make a moral judgment. It's making moral judgments while claiming that you have no moral foundation that you're in trouble.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm starting to think. Like, bring back moral judgments if you know what it's founded on. That's a good
Oh, is this our
caveat.
new Biden administration official?
Yes, this is the new. He's in charge of
Nuclear
nuclear
something?
waste. Yeah,
Nuclear waste. Well,
in the
it's
in
good
the
that
energy
waste is in the
department.
title, so.
Waste. Something about spent waste.
Right. Nuclear fuel rods and things. Meanwhile, like
Yeah.
Gavin Newsom is trying to shut down all the nuclear reactors. So my opinion on this is this is an adult's choice. They can make the choices they want. The Biden administration's view on this is that this is a diversity hire. White men are diversity hires so long as they have the right kind of sexual kinks.
Yes. So my feeling on this is Sam Brinton. That's his name. He's being celebrated right now because he just got this Biden appointment. And people were asking me, why do you care? Why do you care when a consenting adults do in the bedroom? Why do you care? How does it affect his job? And I tried to articulate it. Here's why I care, and you can tell me if there's any holes in this argument. I care because this isn't private. He published these photos. He publicizes this. This is in magazines. And for anybody who's just listening, it's a picture of him, and he's engaged in one of his fetishes that he calls pup play, and he's there with a man who's got a dog mask on and a dildo shaped like a tail up his bum. And then, he pretends to be the owner. This guy pretends to be a dog. And then there's sex involved, usually. It's in a magazine. It was in Metro Weekly. I care because it's not private, and because this sort of aberrant sexual behavior, these kinks, these fetishes, they're now being, in our culture, it's like, well, now we celebrate you, put it out in the public. We all want to see. And now you're this brave and stunning diversity hire, right? Because of this.
Yeah. Well, the issue that I have with this, I mean, these fellas can do what they want. I don't have any standing to get in their way, and nor would I. I don't want people coming in and telling me how to run my life either. But I do not understand why sexual fetishes are being celebrated. They have become intertwined with pride. And to me, pride, when I was younger, except gays and lesbians, it's like there's not a lot of control you have over your sexual orientation. And I have no issue with anyone's sexual orientation. But once kink was brought into the fold, and you see this pup play thing going on at Pride, and the twerking for kids and all of this stuff, it doesn't seem like a situation where our better selves are being upheld.
Yes.
And I don't know why that's what we want to do. It used to be that if you wanted to engage in fetish play and kink, you would go to a nightclub and do that. You can go do all of the things you want to do. I don't know why we have to put them on the front pages of things like the New York Times. And the other thing too, going back to the concept of a consistent value system, consistent perspective, how does Biden justify having white men as diversity hires? Yeah. It doesn't make any sense. This guy is a young man, right? What is he, 30s maybe?
30s.
Pretty young. Yeah. He's a white male diversity hire in the nuclear energy industry. Rachel Levine is a white middle-aged male doctor, fathered a bunch of kids, was already married, and now parades his kink around and is praised for it. And it's this, you know, it's like, how is Rachel Levine a diversity hire? Middle-aged white male doctor in a dress? It's the kink. The kink is the diversity. And I don't have any time for that. I don't think it's legitimate to call these people diversity hires. You know,
I just think it's an upside down of it's evidence to me that as a culture we're at a place, it's just an upside down world where instead of celebrating truth, goodness, beauty, we're celebrating the opposite and all of those things. That's and we're in a place where, like, let me show you one more. I know somebody said take that off the screen, but one more. This is the other reason I care, is because this is Sam Brinton, and he's teaching. He goes to universities. I think this is at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. He's also been at University of Wisconsin. He teaches Kink 101, and I don't like, there's these men on the floor.
The class is Kink 101.
Kink 101, or the physics of kink. And are these men in the dog masks? Are they students? I don't know. But either way, to me, this is the absolute state of our higher education at the moment, is that this guy is celebrated, brought to campuses. Let's do a class for you 19-year-olds on,
kink. When I was in college, I went to Sarah Lawrence College, a traditionally very far lefty school, and I took a literature class on what was it like? I think it was like the excremental in Western literature.
Oh my goodness, that sounds like one of my classes. Worse than my classes.
And we read Stendhal and Norman Mailer. We read Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow. We read some really interesting books, and we looked at them from this weirdo perspective of poop. We looked at them from the perspective of poop, and it was legitimately fascinating. But at no point did my professor bring in a bucket and suggest we all get comfy shitting in front of each other. So I don't understand why there's the practicum. Like, do you need the kink practicum on top of everything else? Also, go teach that at Bennington. Like, teach that at Bennington.
Yeah. Well, thank you for talking about that with me. I'm still trying to figure out why, or how to express why I think there's something wrong with that. I mean, in this guy's case, I also have a problem with him in particular, because he's got this story. I don't know if you've looked into Sam Brinton, but he has a story about how he was forced to go to gay conversion therapy, and he's testified. I think it was before the Human Rights Council or something. He's testified before. You can find his testimony on YouTube. But his story falls apart. He's been caught in numerous lies. He said it was a doctor, but he couldn't say where or who the doctor was or where it happened. Then later he said, well, it wasn't a doctor. It was a religious therapist, but he can't say who or where it happened. And he built his public fame on the back of this narrative, or the back of this story about having been forced into gay conversion therapy. And this is why Christians are awful, right? But it's not true. He's got so many holes in it. And so I have a problem with him in particular, because I think he's got a history of, this is why I'm worried that he's in this high position, because he has a history of lying. He has a history of exhibitionism. He clearly wants everyone to see his kink, and he thinks it makes him special and great. And that,
and the butt of his partner too, apparently.
Yes.
Like, yes. I can't get that picture out of my head. I'm just like imagining that tail.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry I put it on the screen, guys. Well,
unpleasant, Keri.
Kamran, you came in just in time. We got done with the gross stuff. Kamran Pasha, Libby Emmons.
Libby Emmons, what a delight and honor to meet you. I was snooping around the chat for just a little bit, so I saw some of the very interesting stuff that you guys were talking about. And I'm glad to come in after that's over, because I got people from Hollywood watching and keeping a careful eye of what I'm saying on this channel. So whatever.
Yeah.
But what a delight and honor to meet you both. Kerry, and Kerry's got the red hat. Red's my favorite color. Like Taylor Swift, red is my favorite color. She and I share that in common.
My husband, I get to go with him to work again today. I'm going to a show right after this. So,
well, you married a rock
star. That's
star.
awesome.
Yeah,
that'd be so cool.
Yeah. There's no better job than being a rock star. If I could go back in time, like a hot tub time machine, I'd go to early Kamran and say, forget this screenwriting crap. Go learn how to play the guitar and just do that. That's the best job in the world, right?
10,000 hours. Yeah.
Right.
So do you guys know each other?
I don't think so.
No, our paths have not crossed, but I have seen Libby on channels before, so it's a delight.
Libby,
I don't know if you've seen me before. I'm this random traditional Muslim guy who's gone into YouTube and said a lot of things that people can interpret as very conservative, which shocks people because I'm a working screenwriter in Hollywood. I've been in industry for 21 years, and I'm still there, and I'm actually creating stuff. So,
cool.
A lot of times I'm a little bit like, which one of these is not like the other, and that's been my whole career, and so here I am.
Yeah, cool.
So, Libby, you just let us know when you have to go.
I should go.
Okay. Well, tell everyone where they can find you.
Mm-hmm.
I am at Libby Emmons on Twitter, and I'm up at the Post Millennial every day.
Yep. Thank you, lady.
Thanks.
Take care.
See you later.
Have a good weekend. It's a holiday weekend.
You too. And happy 4th, you guys.
Yeah. Happy
4th.
Well, that's the red. I didn't even think of it.
Yeah.
Happy
my favorite
4th.
holiday. Okay.
All right. God bless you. Pleasure meeting you. Take care. Well, that transition, one ship passing the other. Okay.
That's all. It worked out perfectly.
You're managing this perfectly. You're a master host.
I wanted to ask you. Well, actually, let me read a couple of these super chats really fast. Yeah, this was thank you. Inside of the Ages gave another super chat and said the cost per pound is a late term reason. Yeah, maybe. I haven't really thought much about it. I will admit I have a lot of ignorance about the market for fetal tissue and stuff, but I know it happens.
Oh yeah, I'm glad I wasn't in for that part of the whole section. I was like, yep.
Yeah.
Well, I got a lot of work to do and I don't need those images in my head today. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, this was not a super chat. I was going to read it for Libby though. I like Libby telling it how it is. Keep kicking ass, girl. Thank you, Sonora. Pirate Tomsky finally joined us. Hello, Pirate. He says, what the hell did I just walk into? Yeah, that happened. Sorry for the images. Sonora Baptiste. $10 super chat. Thank you, sir. He says, if my dad were alive today, he would be very disturbed by all this nonsense going on. Maybe spinning in his grave right now. Shout out to you, Keri, and especially Miss Libby. I'm going to send this. I'm going to screenshot this and send it to her, Sonora, since I didn't get to read it while she was here. And then let's see. Oh, Dion says Kamran is the king of happy energy. You are. You light up the room. Well, I love having you here.
I've got to because I'm constantly being punched in the face by this town. But it's changing. Thankfully, it's changing. It's getting better. Yeah. Now.
Can I ask you? We don't have to put any of those images on the screen anymore. Anything. I just was thinking about this today. I've been thinking about it for a while. You don't mind spiritual discussions?
No.
Could we bring back moral judgment? I think we got to a place where we were sort of like any moral judgment is bad. And we shouldn't make any moral judgments on people. That's a bad thing. And I just realized this morning, I don't think that's true. I think we should be making moral judgments.
Well, it goes back to Kant and some of the great philosophers, right? That is there objective morality, right? And Kant would argue that there is, right? Others would argue. So humanities have been arguing about this from the beginning, right? Let's see about where did this origin of subjectivism begin, or at least the idea of morality. It started from a good place where a lot of, I think, progressive values start from a good place. Like maybe races are equal. Okay, well maybe this race is better than that race, right? It ends up being flipping. So it's the original progressivist thing that began the conversation about values being subjective, right, is from a place of there are ideas. We have a big world, in some countries there's polygamy, in many countries there's monogamy, right? What is the age of marriage in this country and that country? Is sexuality, should people be allowed to have sex outside of marriage? Should the state be involved in that? So there's a variety of opinions on all these issues on the planet, right? And so to address them, I think initially people were like, well, look, the value you have here in America isn't necessarily the value somebody has in Timbuktu. And that's true. However, there are largely universal values that have allowed human civilization to continue, right? And so when you get down to the core of it, there's certain ideas that don't work and they simply don't survive one generation. And we're actually in that generation right now where we've espoused a lot of ideas that by definition cannot survive the generation, because they lead to people not reproducing, which makes the idea go away. And so,
yes, it will have very real world consequences.
so that's again, so the impulse to understand that we have a range of values on certain issues, right? And that they rise from historical things. Because, for example, monogamy arose in the Greco-Roman culture, not as anything to help women, even though we now perceive monogamy as something to make it actually rose as a means of controlling property rights. You would have one wife that was your legal wife, and your children from that line would be legitimate, but you would have these mistresses, and those kids would be illegitimate, and they would be deprived of property rights. Whereas in the Middle East, and this is not just Islam, we're talking about biblical times, you have, the Bible, they're polygamous. Abraham is multiple wives, Moses does. That's normal. In that place, you had regulated polygamy where all the children were legitimate and they had property claims and all of this. And so that was a different way of organizing that system. In both situations, you had one man who had multiple women. It was just a different legal structure around it, right? And different concept of legitimacy. So the pattern repeated itself. The legal structure was different, but the human pattern is still there, right? And so that's what we have to acknowledge.
The pattern of having one man.
Well, historically,
women?
yes. Throughout history, historically there have been harems throughout the world. There's usually, I mean, again, this may be uncomfortable now for you, but one man with multiple is something that has historically existed. And even in Europe, even in Christian countries throughout the Middle Ages, you would have one wife and you would have your mistress, right? We don't have a concept of mistress in Islam. The idea is incomprehensible to us because the idea of one line of your children being legitimate and one line being illegitimate is insane, right? And so, but I'm saying that idea, and again, this is now we start off with an uncomfortable place.
So in Islam, do they have multiple wives?
Yeah, well, polygamy does exist. Polygamy does exist, but it's a very regulated form of polygamy, which people don't realize. It's the Quran, number one, the Quran says monogamy is better. It actually says that. It says you'll never be able to treat your wives equally. But polygamy is the norm.
That's what I thought. So that's why I was having this.
It says that monogamy is better. It says that. It also says if polygamy exists, which was widespread in the world and is widespread today, right? I've met polygamous families. I've stayed in their homes, right, in Africa. And so how do you regulate that? Well, first you put a limit. Before, a man could have 100 wives. Like Solomon had like 300 wives and several hundred concubines, right? In the Bible. And so you put a limit. Okay, you can't have more than 4. And the way you can't have more than 4. Here's the rule. Is they all have to be treated equally. So you have your 2 wives. Each wife gets her own house. If you give wife number 1 a pearl necklace as a birthday gift, you have to give the exact kind of pearl necklace to wife number 2. The idea of making these restrictions so onerous that it starts leaving the system. Right, which is largely polygamy is not normal in the Muslim world today. It's only the incredibly wealthy who can afford. Each one of my wives gets a villa and a car and whatever, and they all. So you don't see it very commonly. You'll see it in like places like Dubai or whatever. You've got all these rich oil sheiks or whatever. And you'll see it in places like Africa, like where I've been to, where everyone is just equally poor. So you don't have to worry about your wife getting a house because you're all like sharing like 2 bedrooms in this little hut, right? Which I stayed in with my, I went there once and, with my mom and with my Sufi spiritual teachers, and the family we were staying with was polygamous. And my mom, is Pakistani, religious Muslim. She's like, polygamy? What is this? I mean, that's not really a thing in Pakistan very much anymore. So she actually asked the head wife, she's like, are you okay with this? Is your husband oppressing you? Right? She's like, tell me, I mean, this is because polygamy and the eldest wife, she's like, what are you talking about? Isn't this normal? She's like, no, we don't really do this in Pakistan anymore. She's like, well, I chose the other 3, because all the women in the village were like, yeah, your husband making a lot of money, so he can't even support one wife. I guess he's poor, right? So she chose these other 3 who basically are, they take care of the kids. They run. She's the queen. They're basically running the household. She don't want to have sex with him. You go have sex with that one, right? She's the one absolutely in charge of the women, right?
This reminds me of Big Love.
Yeah,
the TV show.
Well, the fascinating thing with the Mormon tradition was this was the first effort within. I mean, Mormons will call themselves Christians. Others may disagree, but they certainly see themselves as Christian. And this is the first element that calls itself Christian, reintroducing polygamy, which had largely left the system by the 3rd century.
So what do you think? You said we're introducing an uncomfortable conversation.
Well,
I believe it.
Friends don't think polygamy is a good thing.
I don't. I think it's
Yeah.
immoral. But what
Yeah.
do you think?
We have a different opinion there. So yeah.
Oh, we do. Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
Like
Okay, I
I
didn't
stayed with,
know.
like I wouldn't stay with my family's friends if I thought polygamy was immoral, right? I think all I can see is the ones I saw in Africa were very happy people, and
I
they were
mean,
all
I would stay with the polygamous even if I thought it was immoral. I hang out with
yeah.
people who do things I think is
I know
immoral
you
because
do your
it's
thing,
like,
but I
yeah.
mean, look, I mean, it's like for me, it's like saying Abraham was immoral. He had multiple wives. Moses was immoral. I mean, the historical origin of polygamy, of monogamy, because polygamy is the Bible, right? In the New Testament, we see the rise of monogamy, but all I can say, and it's not for me to tell you how to interpret this as a Christian, but just looking at the historical reality of Christianity spreading in the Roman Empire was monogamous, which was not the structure of the Middle East, right? The Roman Empire was monogamous, and so Christians showing up in Rome saying, I'm going to have three wives, like the Jews of Jesus's time would have three wives, right? The apostles showing up there, that ain't going to work there. They'll just get arrested, right? And so very quickly, it became something that wasn't even an idea in Christianity. Whereas when Jesus was around, multiple wives were normal. I mean, it wasn't controversial to the people of his time in his environment.
I'm not arguing with that. I know it was around and everything, but I believe he talked about, one man created for one woman, and I just believe here when I started reading the Bible a few years ago, and sort of I had this this recognition that what if all of these guidelines, right, that I always thought of as restrictions, what if they're actually what if they're in there because this is the best way of living, and God's trying to lay a path for you of like, this is the best way to be in the world. And so whether it comes, something like don't lie, it's in the Bible. Why do you think it's in the Bible? Well,
correct.
And if you do lie,
if your wife says, does this make me look fat? Should you lie to her?
Yeah. I mean, no. Well, you and I have talked about this before, and I remember I disagree with you. I don't think you lie to her. If she says, does this make me look fat?
Oh, man, if I took the advice from women about how to treat women,
no.
Like, oh, tell her she looks fat. Yeah, that's not going to work out.
Because when I ask my husband that question, I want a real answer. I want to know I can trust him. So when he says no, that I can believe it. And when he says yes, I can believe it. Okay, well then this isn't the dress for me today. You know what I mean? Like I need that truth, because I can't have, but
that's a fair comment. But I just want to go back to the concept of, for example, in what we do know is the majority of the world still, not just in Africa, majority of the Western world, we still have a larger number of women than men. I think in most societies, it's a 51 to 52% women to 48% men. So what do you do with the extra 3 to 4% of women in a monogamous society? They get married. In Europe, that was solved. They became nuns. They either became mistresses or they became nuns. That was the solution. So those of us not in that tradition were like, so one, you never have kids, and one is you end up being this sort of throwaway side bang. That doesn't seem like a moral solution to this imbalance.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so I mean, there is, but again, that's.
Do you think though that I guess what I was leading to with that example of realizing, at least for me, I started thinking, what if all these guidelines are just pointing you towards the best way of living? And the thought I would have about polygamy is, I don't know of a lot of. I just think it's rife for bitterness, jealousy. Like you said, the Quran said you can't pay equal attention to your wives, and I don't know a lot of polygamous people. I do know a lot of this sort of new age polyamorous, where they're not married to multiple people, but they have
they're just
multiple
banging
partners.
and loving each other, and
right, and they're like, this is my partner,
and
then or I know someone who they're married, but then they have a live-in girlfriend, and they have other and anyway, there's always it seems there's always strife.
Sure.
And so
and that's human. That's like within my tradition, the Quran says it is better to be monogamous, right? It is, God prefers this, right? At the same time, there's practical realities of the world. I will say that I think a lot of women are actually, would be perfectly happy with being JFK Jr.'s third wife than rather than marrying some random bozo, right? I think what's been interesting is that the fascinating phenomenon historically has been, it has not been women that have pushed for monogamy. It's been men, because there is something, and I see some of the chat talking about it. There is an element you see, now we say about balancing women. So there's a cost, right? So you got more women in society. Well, now all the women are married. Okay, so they're all taken care of, especially in where we don't have a socialized state where it's going to take care of them. Either they're in a nun, either they're working in a convent, or their husband or their married lover is taking care of them. Somebody's taking care of them. But what do you do in a situation with polygamy? One of the consequences of it, and I'm being very honest about it, is that now suddenly JFK Jr. gets all the girls, right? So what about the average guy who's not getting the girl? He's something really angry. He's got he's pissed off, right? And that can lead to violence. It can lead to rape. It can lead to physical violence. And often those societies will become very militarized. So there is an argument that monogamy was introduced by men to stop inter-male competition rather than female, because that was disrupting their societies. So they weren't fighting over who gets the woman. They're like, well, you're stuck with one, and you can have a side piece, but that's the way it works.
I think Jordan Peterson has talked about this. Do you remember when they smeared him in the press? The New York Times smeared him and said he was arguing in on behalf of enforced monogamy, like enforced by the state. He wasn't talking about it with the state forcing monogamy. He was.
Well, I don't think marriage should be a state issue,
right? He was talking about culturally enforced.
Yeah, no, it's not state issue. Yeah.
Yeah, but he was talking about culturally enforced monogamy, and this very thing that you're talking about is that it puts a stop to some intermale conflict.
Yeah, and so these are practical things. We are, as human beings, and this is each of our traditions is attempting to handle the world as we find it and try to make it better. And each of them has a cost benefit analysis, because there's a side of us, as we both are religious people, there's a side of us that is divine, that is like unto the angels, that is aiming for this wondrous union that is beyond matter. And then there's a side of us that is matter, that is physical body, that is desire. There's a side of us, that is evolutionary psychology, where every man wants to spread his gene at his basis level to as many women as possible. Every woman wants to get the best genes while also getting a protector, and that may not be the same guy. So those are the evolutionary psychology pressures that we have in the dating scene and the game scene, right? And all of that. They're part of being human. And so all of our traditions are trying to make it work. What does not work are these new wokey solutions, because these are all monogamy, polygamy. These are debates that have gone on for several thousand years and are continuing today, right? And they're traditions that have been passed on because they work for those societies, right? The stuff that's being created today is not passable. It will not survive another generation. I'm looking at all my, I just had to get rid of somebody off of my Facebook who was driving me crazy because, I posted I liked Elvis. And this person just came on and was like, do you know Elvis was, he started dating Priscilla when she was 14 and he was a pedophile, blah, 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 blah. I was like, well, the value system in 1956 was very different from today, right? She's like, that's unacceptable. I was like, and finally, after a while, I was like, this is somebody I know who's basically, 45-year-old unmarried, angry feminist who I've known for quite some time. I said, you know what, Priscilla seems to be perfectly happy to be Elvis's, the bearer of his child, and she takes her entire public persona as I'm Elvis's ex-wife, right? And so maybe you should just let Priscilla make the value judgment on that.
You will never find a perfect human, by the way. Like, I think it's more about patterns of behavior than about, Martin Luther King Jr.
Oh yeah, he's banging everybody.
He was banging everyone. Yeah. But then
they had to do that in Malcolm X. Yeah. They actually have a great scene in Spike Lee's Malcolm X, which is one of my favorite movies, where Malcolm is actually a very dedicated family man. He was very dedicated. He was a handsome guy, and a lot of women chasing him, but he was dedicated to his wife. And there's a great scene near the end when he knows he's going to be assassinated. He knows it's coming, and he calls his wife from a hotel room, and he's basically telling her how much he loves her and misses his daughters, right? And he's going to be killed the next day. And then we switch from the only time we see that the FBI has been monitoring him. There's only one moment in the film. We see that the FBI is taping the phone call, and these two FBI agents are laughing. They're like, this guy's a monk compared to Martin Luther King. Like, we're taping King, and we're having fun watching his parties. This guy's a bore.
Yeah. He took his beliefs very seriously. Yeah. That's what I appreciate, though, is I really appreciate people who take their beliefs sincerely and practice them. And so I really want to go back and watch that movie.
So when I have my four wives, so here are my four wives. So when because I've been thinking about this. Okay, fine. If I get my four wives, I'll have a nice, lovely Bosnian wife, nice, lovely Turkish wife, maybe a nice Iranian wife, and I love Indonesian women. So these 4 Muslim countries. So I was like,
Don't you
so
have to
you
get
guys,
one wife first? You're already planning for
yeah.
the
So just,
4.
if I'm gonna do it, it's all or nothing, baby. It's all nothing, right? It's all or nothing. So you're gonna come hang out with me in my little how this compound where each of my wives has their houses,
I'll
right?
come
I've
stay
actually
with
looked at
you.
one in Morocco.
I think
that's
it's
really
immoral.
beautiful.
I'll come stay with you.
Come on,
I
hang out,
if I don't get that whole sort of like, if you don't hang out with people who do immoral things, it's sort of like, well, then who do
immoral. My
you
wives
hang
are
out with
happy with it.
yourself? No, but I mean,
You think Abraham was immoral? You think Abraham was immoral? Seriously, do you think Moses was immoral? They were like monogamous. What are you talking about? Nobody's
I
monogamous.
do, but
Okay. They didn't
but
think
the
so.
thing
God
is,
was okay with them.
but the thing is, like, my point is, whatever a person's own opinions are, right? About like, well, that person's doing something immoral. If you were to say, well, I'm not going to break bread with them or hang out, then how do you even hang out with yourself? Because
it's what Jesus did. Jesus
like,
is famous for it. He's hanging out with prostitutes and these tax collectors everybody hates and whatever.
Exactly. And also, if your belief is strong, it's like, it shouldn't be, I don't know, at least in my experience, and I've only been a Christian a few years, but it's not rocked by hanging out with someone who has a different belief than me.
Because you're secure in your faith, right? I mean, we've talked about this. There's a difference between belief and faith. Belief is commitment to a series of ideas which can be challenged and might be inaccurate and may fall apart. And then if that's all you got nothing, right? Faith is an internal experience of a relationship with the cosmos, with God, with the creator, that, you can learn and grow, and your ideas might change about your own beliefs as a person.
True. Yes.
Your relationship with God doesn't change.
True. I really enjoy talking with you, Kamran. It's somebody said, and you're willing to have these kind of conversations with me. So glad I got to catch a live stream with Kamran.
Oh yeah, I'm trying to have a conversation about polygamy with my liberal Hollywood friends. Oh my God! Can I tell you one incident? When I was working on I was actually working with Oliver Stone on a project that never got on the air. It would have been an incredible project. We were developing a project together about Guantanamo Bay and about there's still people there 20 years later. There's still people being held there without trial for 20 years. Right? Start off when they were 18 and now they're like in their 40s, whatever. So
wow.
we're doing it. We're looking. We were fictionalizing one of the actual cases that happened, and we were developing a drama for Showtime, and this drama was killed because one of the people that was at least listed on the masthead as being a producer on the show, even though I never met him, was Harvey Weinstein, and so he was killed right when the Weinstein stuff happened. Okay. But one of my colleagues on the show was woke. She was infamously woke, right? She's one of these people. Is not, she's one of these people that will lecture you about being vegan.
Okay.
She had like a pit bull that was attacking other people's dogs, and she blamed other people's dogs. But she's got to save the pit bull, right? There's nothing wrong with the pit bull, right? And so this person's out of control. And other writers will be like, "Oh, I worked with her. She's completely insane." Like, even by Hollywood standards, she's always like preaching. And so
like a vegan fundamentalist,
and just in general, there's wokey fundamentalists, right? And I would piss her off in the room by saying, she would be talking about civil rights, and I'm like, Malcolm X was pretty conservative, right? Clarence Thomas cites Malcolm X as one of his primary reasons to become a lawyer, because Malcolm X taught self-empowerment to Black people. And that really made her very uncomfortable, right? And so, Clarence Thomas is a Malcolm X follower. You do realize that, right? She didn't, because she doesn't know anything about him, right? And so, but the thing that really actually got me angry in the writer's room, because I took it very personally, was she started preaching her veganism. Preaching, because you can't stop preaching this thing, right? Just you want to put this, you want to deny nutrients to your body, you don't want to have honey or milk, fine, whatever. You want to be like that, do it. And destroy yourself, and I don't care. Don't tell me, right? But they won't stop, right? My vegetarian friends don't bother me, right? They won't stop, right? So she's preaching veganism, and I'm like, well, in Islam, it's actually coming up, perfect timing. The month of the pilgrimage began yesterday. The Islamic month of pilgrimage began yesterday, and at the height of the pilgrimage, you reenact Abraham's moment of the sacrifice, where he replaces his son, and a ram is sacrificed instead.
Oh, right. So okay.
It's a pivotal thing.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's absolutely, every year Muslims sacrifice animals and give the meat to the poor, right? And this is a huge tradition where often in the poorest, like in places in Pakistan, India, or Africa that I've been, some people, they only eat meat once a year because they can't afford it. And this is the one year when they're given to it as charity, they get meat as part of the sacrifice of Abraham, right? And so this is a huge part of Islam. And in the old tradition, I've seen it, like when I was staying with my grandfather, the old tradition is you would keep the goat in the house. You would keep the goat in the pen in the house, right? And then you would bond with the goat. You would actually treat it as a pet, so that when it came time to actually sacrifice it, it's very emotionally painful. And you understand, one, what Abraham was being asked to do, Number two, you understand you're taking a life when you eat. It's not factory produced stuff. There is, like with Native Americans, you got to honor this thing. When you take this animal, you're taking its life to eat it, and you need to understand and respect that. And
it's not removed.
Yeah. And so like when I was a kid in Karachi, there would be on the Eid, the Eid al-Adha, the day of the sacrifice, you'd walk down the city street of Karachi, and the sidewalk was flowing in blood from people sacrificing in their like, wow, living room or whatever. And so the whole sidewalk. But this is a tradition living today, and I'm going to be sending money to have sacrifice done. I do it every year in Africa and give the meat to the poor. But I told her that. I was like, we Muslims, we sacrifice animals. We still do it by hand. In fact, I have a friend of mine who is trained, because there's a specific way in both Judaism and Islam where you sacrifice an animal that it's biblical, right? Where you basically strike the animal one blow in the neck that's very fast to the jugular vein at a certain angle, which it basically puts it to sleep. And they've actually done studies, like a German scientist did studies. We actually put electrodes on animals that are being sacrificed under like the halal or the kosher way. And what he found was the moment the knife hit, the part of the brain that's sleep activates, and the animal just goes to sleep and is not aware that it's dying, right?
What?
And part of it, yeah, I'm telling you, I'll send you the link to the German article. It's fascinating, because this angered vegans a lot, because there's been an effort by secularists in Europe to end both kosher and halal sacrifice. They just think it's barbaric. And it's like, no, this is because part of the thing is you're not allowed to let the animal see the knife. You actually have to never let the animal be seeing another animal sacrifice, because this is a very traumatic experience. And this is the one way to minimize the suffering of the animal that we found historically. And the fact that these traditions out of the Middle Eastern desert, the biblical traditions, came up with this when they didn't need to. Let's kill the animal. Everyone's kill the animal. They don't give a price about it, right? Stun it and do it, right? This is something that's profound. And I said this to her, and she turned red with anger. She couldn't believe. I'm like, yeah, I have a friend of mine. He's done that. He's held the animal here in the United States, like on a farm in Arizona. He's held the animal by the neck, and he sacrificed it with his own hands. One of my closest friends. And he said it was one of the most profound moments of connection with life itself and understanding what eating is and what meat is. And it made him bond with the animal more than the stupid go to do
go to McDonald's. Yeah,
you don't know what you're getting. And you're just putting these factory farms that have been crushed by machines and horrible stuff. And so that really upset her. Like she turned livid. It was as if I was talking about the other side of the Abraham story, like I had sacrificed a child, right? She couldn't believe. I was like, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, yeah, we sacrifice animals, and it's a good thing. And she
to bring this back, because I also want to make sure you have time. You were going to tell me about the Elvis movie, speaking of, but I wanted to bring this back to the question I was asking you, because then we started talking about monogamy and polygamy and veganism or killing animals or not. And the question was, do we need to make moral judgment great again?
Well,
or that's one way of phrasing it.
What it will do is it will create divides, unlike people are like you, right? Which is like, I have my judgment of right and wrong, but I'll interact with people. Most people can't. For example, polygamy is wrong in every circumstance. Then most people will be like, well, screw that guy. Put that person in jail. I don't want to deal with them, right? It will. Moral judgment is a good thing. It will also create divides when we don't agree on certain individual things. We all agree murder is bad. Is the death penalty bad? There's disagreement on that, right? There's a range of thoughts on that. Is that murder, right? And I'm going to say something controversial here, which is going to maybe shock you, because as usual in the chats, there's a few characters, negative Muslim, anti-Muslim crap, whatever. You say what you got to say. I'm whatever. I know my religion. She knows her religion. We don't. And I get
friends. The anti-Christian stuff too. It's okay.
We're friends. You guys, you don't have to like. I'm not going to convince you my religion is correct. She ain't going to convince you your religion is correct. Whatever. Say whatever you want.
I'm playing the long game here, guys. I'm kidding. I'm just kidding.
I think in both of our traditions,
I agree.
Faith is a blessing. You would say the spirit, right? So it's not your job to convert.
I agree. I don't think I can convert anybody anyway.
You just witness, and God does what He's going to do, right? And so that's it, right? And so, it's. What I'll say that's going to be controversial here, which will surprise my progressive friends, is that traditionally, under traditional Islamic law, the majority of Muslim scholars have said that abortion in the first trimester is acceptable. And there's a reason, right? Because they have said that life does not begin on conception based on an Islamic story, that the angel breathes the soul into the fetus at 120 days. That's actually 17 weeks. That's 17 weeks. That's more. That's more than even Europe that's more than the limits that people realize. So I'm saying that as a result, the thing is, because of our strong social structures, abortion isn't really a thing in the Muslim world, because we're largely still family marriage oriented stuff, right? It's not common. It does happen, of course it happens in the 21st century, right? But it is something that we weaned out largely because we created this very strong social structure. So the debate I'm seeing that to me seems bizarre is like, well, now people can't bang anymore. If we can't have Roe v. Wade, now we can't party anymore, right? Can't have sex outside of marriage. What are you doing? So it's like, sounds like a good trade-off. How's this helping you out? Does this make you happier? Is it making the world better? It's not making the world better. It's not making you happier.
That's the point Libby had, is she sort of said culturally the biggest defense she sees, or the biggest argument she sees recently for abortion, is to preserve a lifestyle. It's to preserve my lifestyle, which she said, which most of the time isn't worth preserving. Like, what are you getting from that lifestyle? That's a moral judgment. But I was right along with her.
The excuse is that is what it is in reality. In theory, the excuse is, well, it's going to oppress people's lives. It's going to make them depressed. They can't take care of this child. Unfortunately, blah 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 blah. It's going to make them poor. Again, quoting from my tradition, there's a verse in the Quran that says, where God is quoted as saying, "Do not kill your children for fear of poverty. We will provide for them." Right? A child brings prosperity. I have a friend, a Muslim friend, who was a struggling artist, and he found out his wife was pregnant. He thought she was, they'd been using birth control, and he's broke. He's broke ass artist, whatever, didn't have any money. And he came to me and he said, "Is abortion halal? Is it acceptable?" And I said, you know what? Even though I know theoretically in the first trimester it is, I'm not going to give him that advice. I'm not going to tell his wife to go abort this child, right? Because I was like, you know what? I'm not going to even have this conversation with you. I'm not going to get involved in this. But what I am going to say this is, I quoted that verse to him. I said, "Trust God. Yes. If you want to abort this child because you're afraid you can't feed it, here's this verse from God. Trust God. He will take care of it." And that's what they both did. The baby was born. The week the baby was born, he suddenly got these major gigs coming left and right, and suddenly he was employed and had work, and boom, because God can take care of the baby. God's gonna take care of the baby.
Yeah, I said this to my husband last night, because we do out loud prayers. I know some people probably think that's cheesy. I don't care. I'm saying something meaningful that I think about it what I'm saying and what I want to say that night, and so does he. And anyway, last night I said to him afterwards, I was like, I think that one thing God has been showing me the past year is that whole idea of trusting and having faith in him, that even when it's not human nature, it's not of the flesh to do so. Even when you're like, come on, God, you're not doing anything here. Like, there's this one verse that I kept reading that said, it was from Exodus, and God says, it says, God will defend you, and all you need to do is remain silent. And sometimes that is so hard for me, because I'm like, you're not defending me, God. Somebody needs to do something. I need to defend myself. And
one of the names of God in Islam,
right?
One of the hardest names for us is El Latif, which means the subtle one. God is the subtle one.
Yes,
he works through the world in a very subtle. Sometimes he does massive miracles of shocking things, but he is largely the subtle one.
And so what I've been finding is, time and time again, and any atheist, just bear with me. You don't have to believe what I believe, but I believe that what I've been finding is that if I do have that faith, that later on he gives me that proof that it's like, see, you had the faith, and see, didn't I take care of you? And I'm like, that's just, there's something, it just puts a smile on my face about that. Because when you're in that struggling for the faith, though, it's hard. But
well, that's what it is, because faith is an inner experience, right? You and I don't have the same beliefs. We have faith. We have an experience of God that's actually, when we start talking about our faith experiences rather than arguing about dogma or scripture, we actually understand each other real well, right? Like I shared the story with you of a Muslim who decides, I'm going to not abort this baby because I'm going to trust God, and then miracles start happening around their life. That's a faith experience, right? You immediately get it, right? And so this is the problem we're facing in our Western, this is the inevitable end result of the historical process of Europe and how it treated religion. You went through this historical process, and please forgive me to my Catholic friends that are out there, where the Catholic Church did go through a period where it was a controlling, not particularly positive element of society, and was suppressing knowledge and information, certainly through the Middle Ages. That's a historical reality that may not be the truth of Catholicism, but that's what it was for a historical period, in the same way that these Wahhabi idiots who run Saudi Arabia are a historical moment that is not truth of Islam, but it's still there and everyone sees it. So Then, in response to that, you had the Protestant Revolution, which was the first effort to rationally approach religion against dogma. And then from that, you had, well, let's use that same rationalism on religion itself, which led to the quote unquote Enlightenment, right? And then more and more led further and further away from the heart and to pure mind. And instead of what faith is supposed to do, which is bring together the heart and the mind, right, and to unite them, we first had our politicians within the European churches that were using emotion, the heart, to control people and shutting the mind off. Then we started moving towards the mind and then cutting off the emotion, which is the connection to God and the spirit. So now we're in a completely quote unquote rationalistic place where we rationalize everything. And we say things that the heart knows are not true, especially like on gender identity and stuff. Your heart knows what you're saying is silly. It knows that. You know, this guy that has a penis and calls with a woman that's swimming with these other women is going to beat them. You know that. Your heart knows that. But your mind has now rationalized it. So you're disconnected completely.
Yes. Disconnect. I think we need reason and faith. That's just that's a conclusion I've come to recently. That's where I'm at right now. So I love talking with you. I only have, because I have to go to my husband's show, about 15 more minutes. Will you please tell me about Elvis and what's great about it?
Well, first of all, I think you should see this movie. And I think
I will.
It is, I mean, I'm going to go see it for the third time this weekend. I saw it once. I saw it once with a friend of mine from Hollywood, didn't want to see it, and they walked away. He loved it. I saw it the next day with my mom, who loved it. And now I'm going to see it with another friend on Saturday. So it is, in my opinion, one of the best movies ever made. And it's not correct. It brings to life Elvis, you know, a character that many people have forgotten or made a joke out of, when he was actually one of the most revolutionary figures in world history, right? But what it does is it actually shows two things that are important to us, to our conversation. One is it actually shows that he's a conservative, traditional values guy. He was very connected to his parents, to his mother in particular. You know, he became incredibly wealthy, and people, you know, and he focused on taking care of his parents, right, and doing good by them, right, which is old Southern boy upbringing. And then the other important thing, actually there's three things. So that's one, his personal values, then the importance of the church to him. And now we'll talk about faith. The movie shows how, and this is something you know from reading Elvis' biography, he was a very religious guy. Yeah, he banged his groupies or whatever, you know, he did his immoral things, as you would call it. He had his little harem, right? But he was he had faith, and it was very important to him. And he found that faith in Black revival churches as a child, because this links to the other thing. He grew up as the one poor white boy, you know, in Mississippi, that his family was so poor, his dad had been put in prison for passing a bad check. So they were basically living off welfare. So they were at the bottom of white society. They couldn't get a place. So they had to go live with the poor Black people in the segregated area, right? And so this one white kid, you know, being raised amongst Black people, experiencing their music, their culture, and their faith, it transformed him. And it shows he was basically a Black man in a white skin. I mean, if we're talking about identity, right? He was like the kid Rachel Dolezal.
He was a Rachel Dolezal,
Black, right? He actually did. I mean, he basically, because he was more comfortable with Black people, because that's what he grew up with. He grew up with their church, and he grew up with their music, and he brings it to the world, right? And that is something that is so anti the woke narrative, right? Because here you've got a guy who is quote unquote culturally appropriating, right? But what he does is, at a time when radio stations would not play rock and roll, sinful Black music, not because there's even the music, it was just because they didn't want to play a Black person on the radio. That station didn't allow Black people. There were Black specific stations that allowed that, right? He becomes the white boy that comes on and starts doing their moves and doing their songs and the rhythm and blues and all this, and bring rock and roll, and people like a white guy, and emerges them. He essentially is, you know, he was God. He was not. They show, the movie shows, he wanted to make a lot more political comments, but his manager prevented him, right? But he made his comments through his music, and this guy single-handedly made the civil rights movement easier. The civil rights movement was horrific, right? A lot of violence, but because by the 60s, when it was erupting, this guy had already created a culture bridge through music, so that people could, you know, you had white people and Black people loving his music. That was the first cultural bridge. They didn't have a cultural bridge for 400 years. They didn't have a cultural bridge. This guy single-handedly created a cultural bridge that allowed us to move forward. That movie's incredible for showing that.
That's awesome. I can't wait to see it. I love Elvis. I have Elvis's cookbook, which you guys can find online, and it's all of the recipes that his beloved mother made. It's his mother's recipes, and then his live-in chef at Graceland. Wow. And it's just this decadent as you imagine.
Yeah,
and it has specific
poor white trash. He was always going to eat this kind of stuff.
Oh,
It's great stuff.
yeah.
It's good food.
It's a lot of stuff from my childhood in South Carolina. It is. And then it has specific menus in there. Like you can reproduce the menu that they made at Graceland when the Beatles came to visit him. And it's like, I can't remember what's in there. Pimento cheese sandwiches and little hamburgers. Like,
but you know, my mom loved it because this was the music she grew up with in the 60s, right? You know, 70s, and you know, it's something that's a very family value. Sure, they have a couple of moments of showing him hooking up with groupies, but it's pretty PG, right? And and guess what? He did that, and that's why Rockstar's a good job, right? Get the harem and the guitar. Keri's gonna hang out with immoral Kamran and his 4 wives and his little girl in Morocco. Come hang out with me, and it's all because.
I would love to hang out with you in real life. I feel like I have, but we haven't. So that would be.
When are you going to come to this sinful place of LA? When are you going to do it?
I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, there's no. It's like going back into hell, right? It's like hell. Why would you go back in?
I did just go to New York. I could do
That's hell too.
I could do both in 1 year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but
are the masks off in New York? Or are people still being crazy?
Actually, I was pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be worse than it was. There, most of the people were not wearing masks. Now, depending on where you were at, because when we went to New York City Pride, myself, Billboard Chris, Alex Stein, Mike Harlow, and Dangerous Rhetoric, and we were just we were hanging out with Billboard Chris doing what he does. And there, if you're at Pride, you're going to see a greater number of masks, and that makes sense because those people are. A lot of them.
They bought into the official narrative. Yes. This is part of the religion, right? You know.
Yes. So. Yeah.
So but the masks are their faces are covered, but their genitals are exposed.
Yes. Okay. Boobs out.
Okay.
Face covered. Sometimes I just like messing with people just to be still. I was at getting a coffee in the little coffee shop there. It was packed. I mean, it's Pride everywhere. There's glitter coming down from the rooftops. It's rainbow flags, trans flags everywhere, and I'm in the Starbucks. We're waiting to get some drinks. We were waiting on part of the group to get there. And there's these younger people there, and they're all dressed out in rainbows. And I just like going up to people and being like, you know, is something happening today? Like, I just like to get reactions.
Well, I mean, again, look, what it is this moment. You know, and I predicted this moment. I predicted this moment that we're at such a place where the pendulum has swung to such a wacko place, right? That it's going to swing back. It's already swinging back culturally, but it's going to swing back to a place where, and Clarence Thomas said it, you know, Justice Thomas said in his approval, you know, if you take away the fundamental claimed right to privacy that Roe versus Wade claimed is inherent to the Constitution, then you take that away. Then that's the basis of gay marriage, universalizing it rather than making it a state issue, right? So we're going to have the pendulum swing back, and I think gay marriage is next, and all that is next. It's going to get to a place where right now, I think our friends on the right, and again, I don't define myself as right or left, I just am what I am. Our friends on the right are going to be very triumphalist for a while, and then it's going to get to a place where, like, you know, let's start hassling gay people in their private lives, and it's going to get to an ugly place. The pendulum's going to swing back.
I think
it'll go from too. You know, it's that's where the voice of those of us that have morality, you know, because look, you know, again, and I'm ignoring the gentleman who's in the chat screaming about Islam, whatever, keep screaming. You know, the Islamic perspective, this will shock people, is that sexual morality is just keep it in your private life, because everyone talking about Islam says you can stone adulterers for death. The whole thing is if 4 witnesses see them doing it in public with their own eyewitness. The idea is keep your sexual lives private, whether it's fornication, whether it's adultery, whether it is homosexuality. Keep your bang in private, right? Don't talk about it, and don't be doing that out in public, because in the Middle East and desert countries, people were, let's bang in the middle of the street, because that's what they did, right? In these primitive cultures. And so my view is keep your stuff private. As long as it's with adults, I don't give a damn, right? It will get to a place where cultural pendulum will swing back, where we will then simply go back to the 1950s morality rates. It will get there, and I think that will be. It won't be great.
So Nerdy Girl says, I fear the right doing that as well. This has been one of my primary concerns since I first started waking up to what my old ideology, social justice, really is.
Yes.
One of my primary concerns is that there will be this pendulum swing. You know, for
it's never. It's a historical process.
And I'm doing an interview next week with a friend of mine, Sohaila, who's transgender and Hindu. That's going to be an interesting conversation.
Which is because there's more acceptance historically of trans in the subcontinent that would surprise people.
Yeah, and she, but she, like a lot of the trans people I know, are very fearful about what's going to happen because of this transgender rights lobby.
Yeah, well,
This
there
part of
are
it.
trans people who mostly just want to be left alone, and there's these
Yes.
activists. There's these
Yes.
activists who are like, you know, who are using them as part of an overarching agenda that's just, this is one element of it.
Yeah. And because they don't,
It
I mean,
will lead
that's
to
the
a
thing. I get so upset when we were at, and I see that Daniel from Dangerous Rhetoric is here. Let me just put this on the screen real fast. Now, I know that your time is limited and you're not doing a lot
Well,
of
I
stuff
do want to
lately,
respond to one person
but
because, because there's
okay.
like a slander anti-Muslim thing. I just want to respond. So Laura Higgins is saying in the chat, you're not being honest. I'm always honest about my religion. You don't have to like my religion. You can believe it's a fake religion and you don't have to like Muhammad. It's fine. It's your belief. I got a different belief, right? But I want to answer on this thing about gay things. Historically, this will shock people. Muslims have actually been very relaxed towards gays, much more than Europeans were. Because guess what? We live in a sexually segregated society where men and women aren't interacting in public largely. And so as a result, there was a lot of private stuff happening between men and women when they're only interacting with each other, right? And it was kept private. And this whole thing of throwing people off of roofs.
This is what I have heard of, is throwing people off of roofs.
Yeah, but that's like saying that the Salem witch trials is normative Christianity, right? It's not. And historically, Muslims have left gay people alone. There's a very large, today in Pakistan, you can go to the large red light district in Lahore, which has a very large gay hookup area that's 600 years old. Right, that goes back to the Mughal era. That's still there, right? That's still part of the culture there, and so, one of my gay friends says he goes to Dubai because he gets to hook up a lot there with Arab guys, right? It's been historically been a don't ask, don't tell culture, because the whole thing is keep your sex life private. We know this is going on. We know when Uncle Ahmed is hanging out with Uncle Hakeem there that they got something going on. We just don't want to talk about it. It was just everyone keep it private, and we don't want to bring it up. I know that that's not the official narrative you're hearing from the Taliban or from the Saudis or anything like that, but historically, that has been what it is, to the point that the British colonialists, when they conquered the Middle East, were so shocked by how laissez-faire the Muslims were towards homosexuality in the 19th, 18th, 17th centuries, that they called it the gay disease. They called it being gay the Persian disease. That is what the British called it, because they like to bugger kids privately in London, but they don't like this kind of social acceptance of it that was happening. And again, in the Muslim world, there was a cultural pendulum swing that the Saudis brought about with their fundamentalism, where it became this stuff, like the Taliban doing crazy extreme things, like blowing up the icons of Bamiyan that no Muslim ever cared about for 14 centuries. We left them alone. Someone else's religion. So using the example of the Puritans who do the Salem witch trials as the norm is what people do when they don't like a religion. That's actually not the norm. And if you go to the Muslim world, you'll be shocked at how people don't give a shit about homosexuality. They just don't.
Can I just want to put this on the screen too?
Yeah, but Laura, I responded to your facts.
I know, but she says, I'm not saying I don't like you. I'm talking about the facts, what happens. Okay, I'm just going to say, as someone, this is a great example of where I don't have, and a lot of times people will jump into conversations when they don't have facts. So I'm not going to jump in because I don't have the facts. I know that I have heard the same narrative that Laura has, and the representations I've seen from
that's the
way
only
that the
narrative.
Muslim world, right?
Because it's the opposite of the West. The official narrative in the West is homosexuality is a wonderful thing. We embrace it. That's the public narrative. The private narrative, people still have a lot of bigotry towards gays. They do, privately, right? They'll just keep it very private because it's not socially acceptable. The Muslim world, the public narrative is homosexuality is an abomination against God. Privately, people, I don't give a damn. Just keep it quiet. That's historically what it is. Now, whether you trust my character or not, I've always been honest. And I'm honest about the things that are done in the name of my religion. And this kind of stuff that you're talking about is not the norm. It certainly is happening today. It is not the historical norm, and it goes against the general tradition of everybody keep it to themselves.
There's also the case that sometimes things are a matter of perspective, and both people can be being honest when it's like, this is my perspective on what this is. I know Laura lived in Africa for a while.
I mean, if I hear about Mormonism, that's my perspective until I meet a Mormon. Then a Mormon tells me, well, that's not true. I got to listen to that, right? Even though I've heard all these things about Mormonism.
So before we got into that, I just wanted to tell you, this is Daniel Delafay. He's amazing. He gives a little heart. He's part of Dangerous Rhetoric, and he's very thoughtful, intelligent guy. And they have a great channel. I know you're not doing a lot of shows right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to be controlled. Even this thing, because the projects I'm working on, they're watching. They're like, you on YouTube? We're just keeping an eye on this. So I'm just sharing my personal belief, but hopefully even the stuff I'm saying is a little on the edge.
But at some point, I think you and Daniel, even if it wasn't on camera, you guys would have a great conversation. Tara says, she was talking about polygamy, that only men who are really getting away with it, with the rich and powerful men.
Yeah, because especially in a system where you have to economically treat the each wife equally, even if you can't emotionally treat them equally, that's a rich man's game. Unless you're all poor, and which equal is equal because you're all poor, right? So it's rich man, poor man's game. It's not a middle class game.
And thank you, Jeffrey Fidley, for the $20 super chat. 1999 says, thanks for having conversations most won't. This is why I love talking to Kamran. So
yeah, well, that's great. Your channel is anyone can come up and say what they want to say, and you can say, I believe polygamy. Well, Kamran, I think that's immoral, but you're still my friend. So okay.
Eric O'Sullivan. Oh, thank you, Eric. He gives a super chat, says happy Friday, and cheers to great conversation with some of my favorite YouTube personalities.
I've seen Eric many times on to chat, so God bless him. Good to see you.
Yeah, happy 4th of July, guys. Are you going to celebrate the 4th? What are you doing?
I'm going to be celebrating the 4th by getting my actual script done that's due next week, right? But yeah, no, I think the 4th of July it's an important holiday, and actually one of the things that I loved about this holiday is, especially remember at the height of the lockdowns in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment when I knew we're going to be okay, because on the 4th of July, they locked down LA and they said, no, you can't set off any fireworks. And the whole sky was lit that night because everyone just set off illegal fireworks, right? And to the point, I remember watching the news, and the helicopters are shocked. Look at all these explosions. People they're spreading the pandemic. I was like, they're not going to win. They're not going to defeat America. They're trying to, but I knew at that moment they're not going to defeat America. They're not going to.
One last one. This is not a super chat, but I just want to read it. The Puritans, this is from Ralmo Greywolf. What a great name. The Puritans I am existentially against. The people like Keri and Kamran I love and want more of. Well, I want more of you guys in the chat. You guys are always, people can disagree. It can get contentious sometimes, but everyone's really cool with each other. Yeah. So oh, look, there's Daniel. Yeah, you guys should talk sometime. You'd have a great conversation. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up because to kick off my 4th weekend, I'm going to my husband's show, and then I'm hanging out with Mr. Chris tonight, and I'm really excited about the rest of the day. So thanks for dropping by. Good luck finishing your script. Tell people where they can find you online. You have a Patreon for anyone who wants to support your work. Yeah,
I'm throwing that link in there. I talk a lot about Hollywood. And the Patreon is a great space where there's a lot of debate about stuff like you. I try to let everyone have their say. But yeah, I talk more about Hollywood than I do about these things, but it comes into it because I talk about the politics and the values of Hollywood a lot. And I give a lot of insider perspective because I'm somehow magically still working there.
I love that you are.
Protecting me. I'm like, oh, I'm still here. I shouldn't be here. I don't know. I'm still here.
I love that you are. And I can't wait to see what you do next. So.
Anyway. And there's gonna be some polygamy in this thing I'm doing next. You're gonna have to deal with
it. My goodness.
It's a historical project set in the world where that happened. So yeah, but it's gonna have.
There's a lot of things I think. Anyway, it doesn't.
It's okay. It's okay. I'm just gonna invite you to my compound with my 4 wives in Morocco.
I'll cook 4 meals.
Member. You'll be welcome. We'll have some really good food. And be like. Yeah.
Can I bring some Southern food from Elvis's cookbook?
Oh my God, absolutely. Okay. And then yeah, absolutely.
I'll do 4 different
one of the 4
kinds
can be a nice Southern girl. I got to think for Southern girls. If I want to be a girl like from Virginia or whatever, I'm okay.
You guys, thanks for hanging out with us. I hope you have a great 4th of July weekend. Thank you, Kamran Pasha, for coming by. Thank you to Libby Emmons, who was here earlier. And yeah, I didn't have this queued up. I'm going to roll this video. Okay.
Roll your video.
Bye, guys.